On August 14, 1385, the Portuguese forces, led by John I of Portugal, prepared for a decisive battle against the Castilian army under John I of Castile. This conflict arose from political tensions and claims to the Portuguese throne, marking a crucial moment in the Portuguese interregnum. As dawn broke on the morning of the battle, John I of Portugal gathered his commanders, sharing his vision for a victorious campaign against Castile. Their faces were set with resolve as they discussed strategies and rallied the troops. At the same time, John I of Castile convened his forces, instilling a sense of unity and purpose. He addressed his men with passion, igniting their spirits for the impending clash with Portugal. The Portuguese soldiers took their positions, forming a resilient front line. Brothers in arms were ready to defend their homeland, driven by a fervent desire for independence. Both armies converged on the battlefield, the tension palpable as they prepared to engage one another. The air was thick with the anticipation of clashing steel. As the battle commenced, the Portuguese forces charged forward with overwhelming determination, their loyalty to John I of Portugal igniting their spirits. The Castilian forces, under John I of Castile, met the charge with equal fervor, their red and gold armor shining like a beacon of their royal resolve. Amidst the chaos, individual acts of bravery began to surface as soldiers on both sides fought valiantly, displaying extraordinary courage and tenacity. Strategically, John I of Portugal maneuvered his forces to exploit weaknesses in the Castilian lines, a testament to his leadership and tactical prowess. In response, John I of Castile adjusted his own formations, attempting to outmaneuver the Portuguese, showcasing his adaptability as a leader. The clash of swords resounded across the field as both armies engaged, each side fighting fiercely for dominance, with the battle nearing its peak intensity. Amidst the turmoil, John I of Portugal inspired his men to rally together, emphasizing their fight for independence and the survival of their nation. The battle surged on as the two opposing armies clashed, but fatigue began to set in among the ranks, testing their resolve. In a critical moment, John I of Castile found himself surrounded, as his forces began to falter under the relentless advance of the Portuguese. Meanwhile, the Portuguese forces, fueled by their leader's spirit, found new strength, launching a potent offensive that began to turn the tide in their favor. As the battle reached a crescendo, the sound of horns echoed across the field, rallying the Portuguese soldiers for one final push. Seeing the tides turning, John I of Castile shouted commands to his men, trying to instill fearlessness amid the looming defeat. Just when things seemed amiss, a gallant act from one of John I of Portugal's knights inspired the others, transforming their fear into rage and resolve. This act stirred the Portuguese soldiers, re-energizing them to push forward aggressively against their enemy, turning despair into determination. As the clashes grew more intense, the morale of the Castilian army began to waver under the relentless advance, a crucial moment in the battle. Amidst the heart of the battle, John I of Portugal saw an opportunity to strike decisively, directing his troops with precision. Failure loomed for the Castilians as they struggled to regroup. John I of Castile fought bravely, but his spirit was waning, along with his forces. At a critical juncture, John I of Portugal saw his chance to deliver a decisive blow that could shift the outcome of the battle permanently. As the sun climbed higher, the sound of clashing swords echoed across the battlefield, creating a cacophony of chaos. John I of Portugal stood resolute, his armor glistening as he barked orders to his men, navigating through the melee with poise and courage. John I of Castile paced among his men, his red and gold armor catching the sun as he planned his next move. He observed the Portuguese formations and studied their positions, seeking an opportunity to strike back at the invading forces with all his military experience. With a loud rallying cry, John I of Portugal's forces surged forward, pushing against the Castilian lines. The ground trembled with the weight of men and horses, as reinforcements joined the fray under the fierce command of their leader. In a critical moment, a courageous knight from John I of Portugal's ranks broke through enemy lines, striking fear into the hearts of the Castilians. His bravery inspired others, causing a ripple effect throughout the Portuguese army, igniting their spirits to fight on. Responding to his knight's bravery, John I of Portugal raised his sword and shouted a rallying call that echoed across the battlefield, solidifying his men's resolve to fend off their adversaries and reclaim their homeland. As the battle raged on, the Portuguese cavalry discovered a weakness in the Castilian formation. With precise coordination, they charged the unprotected flank, contributing significantly to the disarray among John I of Castile's soldiers. Realizing the odds were shifting, John I of Castile swiftly pulled back his more experienced soldiers to regroup, trying to fortify his lines before the tide turned completely against him. Panic strayed among the younger recruits who felt the pressure of the Portuguese attack. In the midst of the shifting tides, individual acts of bravery continued to emerge. A brave sergeant from the Portuguese line recognized the need for support and rallied nearby men, forming a small yet powerful unit to exploit the gap in the Castilian defenses. The exhilaration of the Portuguese forces surged as the sergeant's unit charged forward. They connected with the Castilians at their weakest point, creating a chain reaction that further destabilized their defenses, and John I of Portugal observed the results from a distance, heartened by their success. With the Portuguese forces pressuring the Castilian lines, John I of Castile faced a critical decision whether to risk his remaining troops for a counterattack or to retreat and regroup, a choice that would define the battle's outcome. Choosing to rally for one final attempt, John I of Castile ordered a countercharge, fortifying the few experienced soldiers left, and urging the recruits to hold their ground and fight with everything they had. With renewed energy, the Castilian force launched their countercharge, crashing into the advancing Portuguese soldiers. The two armies collided with fury, and the ground shook beneath them as swords met metal, and cries of valor and anguish filled the air. In a moment of cunning, John I of Portugal signaled his archers, who previously had taken cover, to rain arrows onto the Castilian troops, drastically impacting morale as chaos spread among their ranks, causing disarray. The arrows flew over the battlefield like a deadly storm, causing mayhem as they struck their targets. In the midst of this chaos, small clusters of Castilian soldiers began to panic, leading to breaks in their formation and further enabling the Portuguese forces to press their advantage. Seeing the panic among his opponents, John I of Portugal seized the opportunity. He shouted orders that instilled both fear and excitement, driving his troops to exploit the disarray further and funnel the Castilian retreat into a more chaotic position. Struggling to maintain control against the mounting pressure, John I of Castile felt the weight of defeat creeping in. He issued frantic commands to regroup, but confusion had spread, making it difficult to orchestrate a unified response. As the Portuguese pressed in, reeling from the effects of the arrow storm and John I of Portugal's relentless push, the Castilian defenses began to crumble. Stragglers from their ranks fled the battlefield in desperation, sensing defeat was imminent. With the Castilian defenses in disarray, John I of Portugal took charge, leading his forces into the heart of the retreating enemy. His presence ignited a final surge of courage in his men, allowing them to push forward with renewed vigor towards a decisive victory. As the Castilian forces began to retreat, chaos erupted on the battlefield, with soldiers clashing, cries of war echoing, and the ground trembling beneath their feet. John I of Castile, witnessing the disarray of his forces, attempted to re-establish order, but the retreat was turning into a rout, and his face reflected both determination and despair. On the Portuguese side, John I of Portugal raised his sword high, signaling his troops for a final push against the faltering enemy, igniting a fervor among his soldiers. As the Portuguese forces surged forward, they unleashed a fearsome cry, a collective voice fueled by the desire for independence and freedom from Castilian rule. The heart of John I of Castile sank as he recognized the impending loss. He attempted one last strategic maneuver, urging his troops to regroup amid the chaos. Momentum shifted decisively as the Portuguese cavalry overwhelmed the Castilian flanks, breaking through their defenses and creating a gap in their ranks. As John I of Portugal pressed forward, he encouraged his men to seize the moment and not let the enemy escape, turning this victory into a rout. John I of Castile's forces continued to break apart, panic setting in among the ranks as the well-coordinated Portuguese strategy took effect. In a decisive moment, the Portuguese pushed deep into the Castilian lines, firmly routing their adversaries, pushing them into complete disarray. Realizing the turning tide, John I of Castile attempted to gather his remaining loyal soldiers, seeking to redeem the situation despite the overwhelming odds. The cries of victory began to echo from the Portuguese side as they recognized the imminent triumph, propelling their final assault with renewed vigor. John I of Castile, witnessing the collapse of his army, felt the weight of defeat. He made a hasty decision to retreat, knowing the battle was lost. As dawn advanced toward midday, John I of Portugal took a moment to observe the victory surrounding him, filled with pride and relief for his country. The aftermath of the battle solidified a sense of national pride among the Portuguese forces, marking a turning point in the struggle for independence from Castile. In the heat of victory, John I of Portugal prepared to address his troops, ready to consolidate their resolve and celebrate their triumph. As he addressed his men, John I of Portugal emphasized the significance of the victory for their nation's future, strengthening their resolve. John I of Portugal's heartfelt address instilled a renewed sense of purpose in his troops, uniting them under the banner of a sovereign nation. The victory at Aljubarrota not only secured Portuguese independence but also marked a significant moment in the power dynamics of Iberian politics. With the battle concluded, tales of heroism from both sides would long be remembered, shaping the narrative of Portuguese history.